Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be my gem or junk. Are these older eyeshadow palettes still worth it? Yes or no? Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me, and welcome to the final video in eyeshadow palette month, because today is August 31st and that means that eyeshadow palette month is going to be officially over after today's video. I had a ton of fun making all of those videos. I hope you had fun watching them. But just know that it's not the only eyeshadow palette content that I'm making, because this is a video I do every month, and there are several eyeshadow palette videos that I do on a monthly basis. So if you want to subscribe and join in for the fun, then I hope you are willing to do that. Today we are going back to some older palettes. All of the palettes that we're talking about today I reorganized, and I was just very curious to see if I now like these color stories better now that I've reorganized them. So let's find out together. If you're unfamiliar with the channel, then hi, my name is Maaike. I live in the Netherlands. I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, and this greatly influences what kind of makeup I like wearing. So that's where I'm coming from. I've been reviewing makeup for more than a decade. I love a good eyeshadow palette. I love Essence and Catrice and getting the use out of my makeup. So if you'd like to stay tuned for all of that goodness, then please subscribe to the channel, because then you're updated on whenever I post a new video. This is very hot off the press because I wanted to make sure I had created the looks with these different palettes before I sat down to film this video. And that's just what I wanted to do. So there were 4 palettes that I was going back to this month. And if you're curious what palettes will be featured in this video, as well as in my eyeshadow palette review, it's good to watch some of the videos that I do at the start of every month, such as my Shop My Stash and my monthly hauls, because in those kind of videos, I very often give sneak peeks of upcoming content and things you can expect me to play with in the month. So I showed you these in my Shop My Stash, and today we are going to be talking about Menagerie's Whale Song, reorganized. Urban Decay Naked 2, reorganized. The Gingerbread Spice from Too Faced, reorganized. And the ABH Sultry, reorganized. I know my regular viewers know this about me, but in case this is one of the first videos you've ever seen, I really enjoy reorganizing my color stories. If it's eyeshadow palettes that I've had for some time, or where I just feel the color story isn't quite right, and then I like to just mix it up. I take the shades out and I stick them back in. I do this for palettes that have magnets in, like the Menagerie palette, but the other ones were all not magnetic, so I actually use the hairdryer to soften the glue, and then you can take out the pans and you can reconfigure whatever color story you might want. And this way I can sort of manage my collection as well, because I just didn't really see the point of keeping all of my Too Faced, all of my ABH, and all of my Urban Decay palettes over time. The exception here is Urban Decay. I still have every single palette I've ever owned by that brand, save for one. So if you watch my eyeshadow palette collection video that went up last Sunday, then you will have seen all of those older limited edition palettes that I still have. It's the only brand I've ever truly collected from, you could say. And that's why I felt that I could reorganize some of that, but some of the other palettes I then ended up also decluttering after reconfiguring the color stories. So let me talk about what's on my eyes today, because I'm actually wearing a look with one of these palettes, and it's the ABH Sultry. So in the springtime, I had just realized that my ABH palettes were very underused, and that in a lot of them, there were only like a handful of shades that I liked. So I ended up creating 2 palettes out of a total of 6. I created one more cool toned and one more warm toned. I used the cool tone one, which I put in the Jackie Aina palette, I think last month or the month before that. So I have a video with that up as well, and that was very successful for me. So I was very curious to see, now that I've created this, how it would go. So these berries are from the Modern Renaissance. This green is from the Prism. This is from the Jackie Aina. I think the gold maybe as well. It's got some shades from Sultry. This is also from the Prism. And then I think, I think that's pretty much it. I had Norvina in there, Riviera, Modern Renaissance, Jackie Aina, Sultry, and Prism. Those were the 6 palettes I reconfigured. But judging it by the shades here, it's mainly Modern Renaissance, Jackie Aina, Prism, and a bit of the Sultry. I don't think there are many shades in here from the Riviera or the Norvina. Maybe something like this. This seems to have a bit of a plum undertone. But I'm pretty sure that this shade here is still in the spot where it used to be, because I believe this is actually Twig from ABH's Sultry palette. So some of the actual shades from the Sultry are still in here. But I also just ended up decluttering quite a few of those, not gonna lie. So this is the look that I've created. I went in with the Twig shade in the crease, just to blur that out, and then I used the shade right next to it in the outer V to deepen that up. Then I used this plummy brown all over the lid for a bit of shine, and I topped it with Vermeer from the Modern Renaissance, just to soften it a little bit in the middle, creating like a very subtle hazel eye, you could say. And I also used that in the inner corner. And then I used a little bit of this on the lower lash line with the like blue-green flippy shade that was in the Jackie Aina palette, which is this one, this like peacocky kind of thing. That's on the lower lash line. I still like these shades. They blend beautifully still till this day. They're not moldy, they're not weird, they don't have bad color payoff. They are still really great shades. I just wasn't a fan, especially of the Sultry, actually, because everybody's saying how cool toned this was back when it was originally there. I'll pop some images up on the screen of what these originally look like, because I have images up for all of those over on the blog, so I can source that quite easily, what mine looked like. And to me, it just wasn't that cool toned in the end. So I kept some of the cool tone browns and silvers that were in there, but those are in the other palette, and I kept a couple of the warm tones I liked. I've liked the Modern Renaissance mainly for the berries. I didn't like those neutrally shades that it had at all. And the only thing I'd ever liked about the Prism was the green and a shade called Lure, which is this like mauve tone, which I think is actually that one. So yeah, that's why this ended up being the way it is. And I think it's very successful. However, now that I've used it, what I'm sort of missing, because I kind of went mattes down the bottom and shimmers at the top, is save for the gold, I don't have anything that's like a good mid-tone shimmer. It's all quite deep, save for like what's going on here a little bit. So I felt that when I popped this all over the lid, it turned to be a little bit more sultry than in what I would normally go for, perhaps. But overall, I think I still have the shades that I like, and even though I'm not much of a warm tone gal, the reason why I selected this for August is that the period of me to be wearing warm tones is roughly this time of year. So like August, September, going into fall, that's when I like my warm tones. And I think, you know, just by looking at this, it's fall in a palette for me now, because you get like all of the colors that the leaves will turn as the season changes, but you still have a bit of green in there as well. So you've got some pops of color, you get your warm tone neutrals. So as far as a warm tone neutral palette goes, I think this is very successful for me. So even though it does skew just a little bit deeper than what I would normally go for, perhaps, I still like this. I still have those berries that I like to do like that ultimate berry smoky eye that I like doing in the fall season. So I can definitely use this again, and it's much better to have 2 palettes rather than 6, I think. So I was able to declutter 4 of the palettes, and I've only kept 2 out of those. There are still a couple of ABH palettes that are intact that I still have in my makeup collection, but this was one of the reorganized ones, and I'm so happy I did this once again. Since it's quite a like warm tone, neutral heavy sort of palette roundup, I thought we could talk about this one next, the Whale Song by Menagerie. And this is their blue-green palette. Now Menagerie is a US-based indie brand that ships by weight, so they're incredibly expensive to get. However, this was the only palette that was magnetized. So the reason why it's such a heavy palette is because there's a full magnet in the bottom of the palette holding all the shades in. And as far as a magnetized palette go, I felt that the Menagerie ones were actually the worst to be taking out and reconfiguring it, because it's very tricky to get something in between the pan, because you pretty much have to scoop it out because the magnet is so strong. It's like this whole backing is one big magnet. So we'll keep these shadows in place for sure, but taking it out can be a little bit trickier. There were a couple of shades in here that when I applied them, I felt they were the same as other shades. So there was a blue in here that did exactly like what this would do whenever I would wear it. It is one of my favorite shades in the palette. This is really nice grayish blue. Really enjoy that. But now that I've used it again, and I've put in some of the shades that are here that are from the Violet Ink, which is another Menagerie palette that I used to have. And I just, after using that, I felt it wasn't purple enough. So I took some of the purple shades and put it in my Flight Club, and I put some of the blue tones and put this in here to make this more blue. And now I know, again, I'm reminded of what I'm sort of missing in this palette. There are a couple of really stunning shades in here. I love the shimmers. This is really stunning. I like this. Menagerie has an amazing shimmer quality, but they tend to put more mattes in their palettes than they do shimmers. So I definitely wanted to have an extra shimmer in here, which is why I put that one in. But it doesn't have enough deep shades. It doesn't have enough contrast. And that's the main issue here. There isn't like a really good, like really deep, almost black and green, or like a navy blue that you can use as a liner or to deepen things up to really create some dimension. This is just bright. And I think that that's why whenever I think of a blue-green palette, the first thing that comes to mind to me is still my Ace Beauté Oceanic palette and not this guy. Because this doesn't have enough like light to dark. It doesn't have enough of a gradient going on for me to be able to do very successful looks with it. I love using a darker shade, not necessarily for dipping things up, but as a bit of a liner or on the lower lash line to create that more smoky, defined effect. And it's just really hard with this. And that's one of the reasons, like, this is just so bright and vibrant. And if that's your thing and you want super pigmented eyeshadow, this is a great one. They stain like there's no tomorrow though. So when I actually created the look with this, I actually applied the shadow directly over some shades I was already wearing. And in the pictures, you really cannot see that I was still wearing eyeshadow underneath it because this, it's pigmented, you guys. In terms of quality, I have no qualms with this whatsoever. It's an incredible quality. As I mentioned, I love their shimmer formula. Their mattes are insanely pigmented to the point where they're gonna stain your eyes, which is actually why I decided to not take off that other eyeshadow look that I was already wearing. Because like, the more layers between my lid and this, the better. Because this will stain even though I double prime. I always double prime my lids. It's how, like, this has been on since not like 8:30 this morning, I think. And it's now like close to 5 o'clock. And this is still on, like no creasing, no, like it's a little smudgy on my lower lash line, but it's fine. It's absolutely fine. And I can wear my eyeshadow all day by putting a neutral or like a clear base first that really allows the shadows to be gripped onto your lid. And then I use my MAC Paint Pot, which I set with an eyeshadow. And it always works for me. So if you struggle with eyeshadows creasing or not lasting very long on you, I mean, this makeup has been on for hours, and the only thing that I would have to redo is my lipstick, which I forgot to do before sitting down to film the video. Sorry. But yeah, this is incredible eyeshadow quality. It's just not my perfect color story. And I'm reminded of that again. I need other things to be pulled in with this in order to make a full-blown look the way I like it to come out. My favorite, my baby, the Urban Decay Naked 2 that I turned into a Naked 2, a Naked 3 baby. So I think I did it last fall. I have videos where I reorganize all of these, so I can link them in the description box down below. And I'm just so happy the way this came out. It's been living in my everyday makeup drawer for the entire year, but I wasn't really reaching for it. Mainly because I always just run out of time. I sort of had it in there to have a backup plan. You know, if I don't know what to wear one day, I can just whip up a look, and that's exactly what these shades are for me. I still have backups of the original Naked 2 and Naked 3 that I've bought later, right before the Naked 2 was discontinued. I actually think I got one from eBay or Amazon Marketplace or something like that when the palette had already disappeared from the market. And I sort of panic bought a backup. So I still have the full palette just in case I ever want to go back to it. But these are my old shades. This palette is over a decade old. They still work fine. I love it. I did my favorite look for you guys, which is Nooner from the Urban Decay Naked 3, YDK from the Naked 2, and then I think a little bit of Mugshot somewhere, and then also this Dust shade from the Naked 3. So I always make like a mix of like Naked 2 and Naked 3 shades whenever I'm using this. It's stunning. I really enjoy playing with this. I've kept the two mattes that I like. Everything else has a bit of shimmer. I've got huge dents in this as well. I'm not sure if you can see. This has a dent, this has a dent, this has a dent. And I think this is the shade Suspect from Naked 2, so that's one of my favorite all-time taupes. I have Verve in here, like I said, Mugshot, YDK, Trick, Factory, I think, and then Snake Eyes and Pistol. Those are the shades, and this is Blackheart from the Naked 3, but I just love this entire thing to pieces, and the way this is just now configured. I'm just so much more inclined to actually reach for this, and I wish this actually existed and that it was like something you could purchase, because this is insane. I think that if you go to an indie brand or a brand that sells singles, something like Glam Shop or Sydney Grace, especially Sydney Grace, because I feel their shimmer quality, if you go for their satins, you're going to get a very similar look to these satins from Urban Decay, because this is from the back in the day when we didn't get foils and duochromes and multichromes in palettes just yet. It's that old. But I think you can very easily recreate something like this with singles if you were to, if you were ever interested in creating something like this yourself. I've definitely come across a lot of shades that are similar to what I have in here over time. But this is great for a one and done, one-stop shop. And I said when I reorganized this eyeshadow palette that I was going to try and hit pan on as many shades as I could this year. But now that I've used it a couple of times, I'm like, you know what? I actually very much no longer want to hit pan on this, because I want to keep using this the way it is for some time to come, because the aim was to get pan in as many shades as possible and then declutter it at the end of the year. But I'm no longer willing to do that because it just works so well for me that I'm so happy with the way this is now configured, and I will only throw this out once these shadows go bad. They are currently still fine, no mold, no weird smells. They still apply beautifully with a brush. They haven't given me pink eye. So it's still good to go. I mean, if you use clean brushes and you keep everything in a dry, dark place, you don't have to be that afraid that it's no longer going to be good. You can definitely tell when eyeshadow has expired. You can usually tell the minute you apply it to your skin. It gets itchy, or it might smell funky, or it looks different from when you had last used it, and it's definitely not the case with this one. I'm only getting more and more dips in it, so maybe this can be a project pan kind of palette for me someday, but I'm in no hurry because I'm really enjoying this one. And finally, the Too Faced Gingerbread Spice. This is a conglomeration of Too Faced Chocolate Bar, Sweet Peach, and the Gingerbread Spice. Now, I also used to own the chocolate bonbons, but that had the heart shape, so it was going to be very difficult to like depot and reorganize it with other palettes. And I used to own the semi-sweet as well, which both of them I've decluttered, mainly because the color surges weren't it. In the semi-sweet, the only shade I ever loved was the rum raisin shade that was in there. But I have a shade that's similar to it in my white chocolate bar that I even like better. So there weren't enough shades in the semi-sweet that I even wanted to reorganize it. But in these three, I've taken shades from all three to create this color story. And I finally did a look with this the other day. This still smells. Like, I can still smell peach and cocoa scent coming from these shadows when I open the tin. And these are old. Again, I think my Too Faced chocolate bar is from like, when did I buy that? I first got the semi-sweet. I know that was the first one I bought. It must have been like 2015. Like, it's old. It's old. I know that this is the Hot Toddy shade that was originally in here. And I also believe this shade down here on this end is one of the shades from the actual Gingerbread Spice. But everything else, I just completely mixed it up. I reorganized all of the shades to see what was too similar. There were so many mid-tone browns in these Too Faced palettes. It was insane. And I definitely didn't need that many. So what I went for is a full row of mattes, then a row of darker shimmers, and a row of like lighter and mid-tone shimmers. So here again, as with the ABH, one of my issues with a lot of ColourPop Too Faced palettes was always that everything looked quite smoky and glam like this turned out, because a lot of the shimmer options that were mid-tones on most people turned to be quite like darker on my skin tone. And I still feel that way. Like, I feel that it's stunning. The way this now performs, I really enjoy it. The mattes are beautiful. I love how it comes together, but it is quite deep. And then there's no real like transition between the very light stuff and the much darker shimmers. And it was just not there in those palettes. So that also teaches me again how a lot of eyeshadow palettes were not quite right for me, and that I was right about that feeling that I had even when the palette was still intact, that I just got really smoky, dark, sultry looks out of something like the chocolate bar. That wasn't necessarily my favorite. What looked very everyday and elegant on people with medium and like olive skin tones, I feel those people looked beautiful in these Too Faced palettes. But on my pale face, it just looked a little like too much in some occasions. Like, I love wearing eyeshadow. Like, I love wearing like a colorful look or something that's a bit smokier. I wear a lot of different things going into work and like doing my day-to-day life. I definitely mix it up, but it's not something I want to go for all the time. And I've been really into like my one and done washes of color with my K-Beauty stuff, and the Urban Decay palette lives up to that a little bit better than this does. I've kept all of my favorite shades from those 3 palettes, and that's all I very much needed from Too Faced. I don't think I'll be buying another Too Faced palette anytime soon, also because they're so repetitive. I still have my white chocolate bar and this, and I think I'm good to go. So again, it was the right call to be like putting all of these 3 palettes together and turn it into one. And so far, I don't think any of the color stories I've gone back to that I've reorganized have been unsuccessful for me. They've all worked. So I'm very happy that it's all worked out in the end. There's a couple of ColourPop things that I might want to try next that I have reorganized in the past and that I just haven't gotten use out of since reorganizing them. But I just think this is a nice way of testing things out. Like, how does it work for me now? And it just shows you that with a bit of creativity, you can give your eyeshadows a new lease of life, because sometimes we're so stuck with the palette and we're stuck with this one look that we keep doing all the time. And if you rearrange it, you also are, again, inclined to be using your shades perhaps in a slightly different way, or maybe that. So if that's you, if you feel bored or overwhelmed by some of your palettes, maybe take the shades out and put them in a smaller palette, that like the 5 shades you like best, and maybe only keep those over time. You know, those are also things you can do. Definitely done that with palettes as well, where I did it with a Pat McGrath palette. Actually, my Divine Rose 1, I've taken out the shades that I was actually in love with, and the rest of the palette I gave to a friend. Because she was like, oh, I don't mind it if you give me your broken Pat McGrath palette. I was like, okay. So that's that, and I've done it with the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural as well, because that was magnetized as well. So just pulled the shades that I liked, decluttered the rest of the palette. That's just the way I've done it as well. So that's another way you can go. And I just think that it's the best way to really get the most out of your eyeshadow. Sometimes we don't need to buy more, but we can, you know, create our own things as well. So that's it for me for today. Thank you so very much for joining me and watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Thumbs it up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more by me. As mentioned, this is the last video in eyeshadow palette month, but I will be back very, very soon with more eyeshadow palette related content. So if you'd like to stay tuned for all of that goodness, and then I hope to see you in my next video. Bye-bye!